Welcome to the series Employee Health Services, Mind, Body, and Spirit. Employee Health is a section in the City of Albuquerque's Risk Management Division. Its mission is to promote a sense of community and increase wellness among city employees and their families by providing education and counseling about physical and mental health. And now, Mind, Body, and Spirit with Dr. Julia Bain. Hello and welcome to Mind, Body, and Spirit. My name is Dr. Julia Bain, and today we're going to be talking with the State Ombudsman and the Long-Term Services Coordinator about resident rights in long-term facilities. Welcome to the show, Sondra Everhart.
Thank you, Dr. Bain.
You're back. Our Ombudsman, Shannon Cupka.
Yes.
Welcome. I'm glad
Thank
you all
you.
came back to talk to me. How long has it been? A couple of years?
At least one,
Yeah.
not more.
A little over one, not that long.
All right, well, you're back to talk about resident rights and protecting one of the most vulnerable parts of our population, which is frail and elderly and people who are in long-term care.
Correct.
And we were talking before we came on camera that also does include assisted living.
Yes, it does. The Ombudsman program by state statute has oversight authority in all long-term care facilities, whether they're licensed or not. We do have a few assisted living units in New Mexico that aren't licensed. We still visit those residents and tell them what their rights are and help them.
Good to know you're out there. A couple of state employees. Awesome. You rock. So let's just get right down to it. Our first question is, what does the state ombudsman do for our communities around New Mexico? What do you do?
My responsibility as state ombudsman is to oversee the office of the state ombudsman. That includes all staff and about 120 certified volunteers statewide. So we have we have certified ombudsman volunteers in nearly all of our nursing homes all over the state. So there is a presence that families and residents recognize. And volunteer ombudsman, residents relate to them like we all do. Who do you talk to when you have a problem or you're upset? You talk to somebody you know and somebody you trust. So volunteer presence in facilities is very important. We also have the responsibility out of the office for systemic advocacy, speaking out on public policy that as it impacts residents in nursing homes, speaking out in favor or against pieces of legislation that will support or potentially harm residents. So we have a hands-on complaint investigation activity and then the systemic advocacy.
So even though you're a state employee, you're still able to sit on that fence, so to speak?
Under the Federal Older Americans Act, the state ombudsman is an independent, has independent authority in certain areas. So yes, I'm a classified state employee, but the need to be independent in order to speak out on behalf of residents is an independence recognized and respected by the state of New Mexico's government.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it is.
And I was just thinking about back when 30 years ago when my grandmother was in a nursing home, and were there ombudsmen at 30 years ago, or is this a fairly new position?
30 years ago, yes. It was just beginning 30 years ago, but at that time, I believe was the ombudsman were limited to nursing homes. We have since expanded the program to all long-term care facilities.
Okay, good.
So,
Our program actually began in the late 1960s as kind of an offshoot of the Nixon administration, who had basically, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for people to voice complaints or concerns and no independent advocate with which to do that. So the Ombudsman was created to kind of meet that need. And then in the 1980s, the Congress sought fit to expand our role into board and care facilities, assisted living homes, et cetera.
Okay, good.
And I think Shannon just hit on a point that is very, very important, and that is the Ombudsman is the independent advocate. We do not work for the facility. We do not work for the family. We work for the resident. We are the resident's advocate.
And why does why would a resident need an advocate?
They would need an advocate if, for example, we have a situation currently where a woman in a nursing home wants to go home. And her husband...
And is she medically okay to be discharged?
She's medically okay to be discharged, and she's a fully competent adult.
Okay.
Her husband doesn't want her to come home, and the nursing home is saying, well, the husband gets to make the decision. And that's not true. If you are a competent adult, you are allowed to make decisions. Whether they're good decisions or not, that's your right to make a decision. I mean, it's... today is Thursday, and I would be willing to bet even you, Dr. Bain, have made a decision that probably wasn't a good one. Things that we get to make bad decisions, an extra cookie.
Not today, Sondra. Okay?
You know,
yesterday I made a couple of bad ones.
Right.
But today I'm good to go.
You're clear.
But you made a bad decision because you could. And individuals in nursing homes have the right to make what I might consider a bad decision, or their child or their husband might consider, but that's the individual's right. Those are part of the resident rights.
And when somebody's living in a long-term care facility, you know, some of the facilities, I've seen a wonderful quote that I think really resonates with us as Ombudsman, but it says, residents don't live in our facility, we work in their home. When you move from your home in the community and you go to a long-term care setting, that becomes your home. And so all the same rights that you would expect to have as a private citizen, you can and should be able to have as a resident of long-term care. And in fact, in long-term care, you get additional rights that you or I don't enjoy as private citizens. For example, one of the rights that a resident has is they have the right to appetizing and nutritious meals. That falls under the category of fairness under our state law. And so, you know, we might walk through the door of our house this evening and say to our loved one, I've had a really long day, and I'm ready now for my appetizing and nutritious meal. And they might say, well, you know, McDonald's is down the street and get me some fries while you're at it. We don't have that right. But a person living in long-term care, in a long-term care setting, has the right to that kind of appetizing and nutritious meal. So that the laws that protect vulnerable adults in long-term care settings go above and beyond that of the average citizen.
Wow.
And one of the rights that New Mexico has been working on and currently is ahead of the national average is the right to be free from physical restraints. And I don't know if you know this, but one of the most common physical restraints is a recliner, a reclining chair.
I never thought about that.
Well, residents, you recline them back in the chair. Do you know how much strength it takes to bring that chair forward?
Right.
So if you walk into a nursing home and the whole down the hallway is recliners with residents, ask 2 or 3 of them if they can sit back up. A restraint is defined as any mechanical or piece of clothing, piece of machinery, or piece of clothing that restricts your motion.
Well, that makes sense, because if you put a resident in a recliner,
They
then
can't
they're
get out.
stuck.
Right. It's like a gate belt. You know, a gate belt is about this
Yes.
big, goes around.
I remember those
If
were...
it's in the front and it's used to help somebody walk and the resident can undo it, it's not a restraint. When you put it on and hook it in the back, that's a restraint. So, but New Mexico nursing homes have been working very diligently to reduce the number of individuals with physical restraints statewide, and are doing an excellent job.
Good.
So
Good to
excited.
know. Yes, just because... What was the question you asked me to ask you before that we came on air? Just because you have wrinkles, does that mean you can hear? Is that
No.
the question?
There are people that think there's a correlation between wrinkles and deafness.
Yeah.
That if they see an elder who has wrinkles, they have to talk like this. And that's not always correct. That I think elders, competent elders, have rights. And what we advocate is that you listen to them. They have a voice. They have a right to a voice.
And show some respect.
Respect,
Social
but, and listen.
and part
Listen
of
what they say.
And part of respect is not screaming in somebody's face.
Right. The other thing is not everybody likes to be called sweetie and honey. If you have a gentleman that was an attorney and fought for this country in the Korean War, sweetie is probably not what he wants to be called.
Okay.
And we should ask people, do you want to be Mr. So-and-so? Do you want to be Colonel so-and-so? Do you want to be doctor? How do you want to be called?
Right.
And sweetie just doesn't always do it.
No, it doesn't. Shannon, I wanted to make sure that you told the audience, as the outreach coordinator, what do you do?
Well, I do a lot of in-service education in facilities. We have a little bit more than 340 licensed and unlicensed homes throughout the state. So
And you go to them and...
We'll go and we will do education on resident rights. We actually also try to help work with staff because some of the issues that they face in the caregiving role when it comes to some of the dynamics involved might put them in a position where they're feeling challenged in terms of how do I work with this individual, or how do I work with maybe a difficult family situation. So we'll train on all different kinds of issues to try to help improve the quality of care and quality of life for residents.
Good.
I'll also talk to folks in the community. A number of different community groups will access us to learn a little bit more about long-term care and how to navigate the system. And what we really focus on in our education is how to be a good advocate for yourself and for your loved ones. There's a wonderful quote by, I believe it was former First Lady Rosalind Carter, and it says there's 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And so sooner or later, we're going to find ourselves in the position of receiving care or providing care for a loved one or for ourselves. So it really is incumbent upon all of us, I think, to be educated about what's out there and to make the decisions that allow us to just continue to call the shots in our lives. So that's what we try to do, is really let people know what we provide as Ombudsman, what our larger department, Aging and Long-Term Services, provides, because there's a number of different services that fall under that umbrella, and try to help people just be educated consumers and continue to live life on their terms.
Yeah, to be able to maintain your sense of control and know that you still have power. You may not be able to run around the block, but you still have power.
Right. And that's why rights actually is so important to us, because when you're vulnerable, when you're in the position of putting yourself in the hands of a stranger to care for you, I mean, that's a level of vulnerability that most people won't necessarily understand unless they've experienced it themselves. And so rights become so important because it does, speak to control. It does speak to being able to make meaning still in your life, no matter what age you are. Being able to decide what you want for dinner, when you want to have dinner, when you want to wake up. These basic things.
Or even if you want it.
Right.
Do you have the right to say, I don't want to eat? Or is that considered suicide behavior? Like, let's say somebody says, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, and it's been 4 days in a row. What would the nursing home do? Would they continue to let that person not eat?
They would probably ask for a psychiatric evaluation to make sure that there wasn't another problem like diagnosable depression. But there are times when elders are actively dying, and respecting that process is very difficult for most of us. Very difficult to have somebody make the decision that they think it's time for them to go and not be in a depressive, suicidal state. So the first thing the facility would do would be to make sure that there were no physical issues, no behavioral health issues, that this was the choice of a competent adult. But society is still a little rough with that process. It's a bumpy road for a resident. I wanted to add to what Shannon said about vulnerable adults. Some of our most vulnerable adults are what we call orphan elders.
Okay.
Elders that don't have any family. The best protection for your loved ones in any healthcare facility is visit, 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 and then visit again.
Be a presence.
Presence, visit different days, different hours, different members of the family. And orphan elders don't have anybody to visit. So for the public, even though you might not be directly associated with a nursing home, if you have a next door neighbor, the gentleman down the street, or the lady that used to be your son's best friend's grandmother, go visit. And yes, again, it's presence. And make sure you listen. Ask them. When they say when you ask them, how are you today, listen to what they say. Watch people in nursing homes when a caregiver comes in the room. If they kind of do this, what does that tell you?
Yeah, pay attention.
Pay attention
Be
to
like
the
a
body
cat.
language.
Be like a cat, ears up, whiskers out. You know, that's how we all need to be alert when we're out in the community, because we're not at home in our easy chair. When we're out and about, ears up, whiskers out. Same is true when you're in the facility talking to somebody. Pay attention. And I think you made a really good point that it is such a gift to go and visit your son's best friend's grandmother. That is such a gift to give another human being.
Or your next door neighbor.
Well, and you get it back in return. I mean, some of the folks that we meet just have the most incredible stories. They are, living libraries. And I think often it becomes kind of fearful for people to go into a nursing home. They may not want to deal with end-of-life issues. It might be uncomfortable. But what you can gain from being around an elder or being around a person who, again, just has an interesting story to tell, is it gives back 100-fold. So,
yeah. And end of life is part of life.
Absolutely.
And I think that the more willingness we have to accept that, the braver we will feel, because it's all coming. It's coming to all of us. It's something you can count on.
Right.
It's going to happen. Okay, I want to make sure I don't miss any of these really good questions. Why do we need to be concerned with resident rights? Well, because the vulnerability, and because a lot of times elders cannot speak out for themselves. And that's why we have these rights. Right. And is this law? Is this policy? Is this, what are these resident rights?
There are 4 resident rights, and we brought you a present.
Oh,
here they are.
A gift. Thank you
gift.
so much.
Fairness, freedom, choice, and privacy.
Well, that makes it perfectly clear.
Yes.
What a good handout. Thank you.
People have, for example, rights that the rest of us take for granted. Residents have the right to open their own mail. They have the right to make a private phone call. One of the issues as ombudsman we deal with is we go into a facility to talk to residents, and we turn around and there's a staff person following us down the hall and into the room, and it's like, excuse me, could you go do something else and come back? The conversation with an ombudsman, if the resident wants, is private.
Wow, and
They have a right to that.
rude. How rude.
Well, they want to know what the resident's saying. One of the major issues we deal with in long-term care with vulnerable adults is fear of retaliation. If I control your pain medication, if I control when you go to the bathroom, if I control when you get your dinner, and I decide if you're going to get it hot or cold, who's in charge? And you're going to work very hard at not making me angry. Because if you make me angry, your pain medication might just be a half hour later.
See, and what's scary about that is that sociopaths, people who don't own a conscience, as well as people with personality disorders and people who are just downright mean, unfortunately, those people are in every occupation, including caring for the frail and elderly
Right.
and medically fragile.
Well,
But you're very fortunate in New
Yes.
Mexico. New Mexico has what I think there's a formal name, but I call it the Unlicensed Abuse Registry, meaning you as a psychologist have a license. That license can be taken away from you. But if I work in housekeeping, if I'm a dietary aide, if I'm a business office worker in a nursing home, I don't have a license.
Right.
In New Mexico, if you are, if a complaint of abuse, neglect, or exploitation is substantiated against you, your name is referred to the non-licensed abuse registry. There is a legal process, there's a fair hearing process or due process under law. If in the final analysis your name goes on that registry, you can never work in healthcare again in New Mexico.
Yes!
Now it is renewed, it's either every 3 years or 5 years, you can ask again. But what it means is you cannot hurt an elder in Raton and go to Taos and do the same thing, and then to Santa Fe, and then to Las Vegas and Albuquerque. You cannot
Right.
do that
What?
in New Mexico.
right,
We stop predators in their tracks.
right. And you know, New
That's
Mexico.
wonderful. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
We
all,
had
and
that
it's
program.
all health facilities.
Right.
If you hurt somebody in a hospital, you cannot be employed to work in a nursing home
Or an assisted living.
or assisted living or a home health aide or a guardian. It's all health entities have to call this registry and see if your name is on it.
And you keep saying in New Mexico, so it's not true across the country? Or
There are some states that have it, but we are one of the very few, and I think one of the first. New Mexico has some wonderful protections for vulnerable adults. The state government and the legislature, in my opinion, a state ombudsman have done a fabulous job
Right.
protecting its citizens.
Oh, that
To-
is so good to know.
To piggyback on what you're saying, and Andrew, you had asked about retaliation, and we mentioned, you know, again, that's a huge fear for people. There's actually specific fines that the Ombudsman program can assess against a facility or an individual for obstructing somebody's access to us as an independent advocate, and also for retaliating against not only vulnerable adults living in facilities, but let's say that you're a caregiver and you witness something and you want to come talk to us, and then all of a sudden somebody finds out that you've done so and fires you. There's protections also in there for staff.
So it's almost like a whistleblower policy.
Yes, and again, I think that's very progressive for our state. So New Mexico really, I think, is ahead of the curve when it comes to protecting vulnerable adults.
Wow.
We even talked a little bit before about people being vulnerable to certain things like scams. And that still, for some people, can continue in assisted living homes, or if people are still handling their own financial situations living in a facility. But, you know, let's say you're out in the community, there's special protections right now for people who are bank tellers who might notice that, you know, your mom or dad have now gained a new friend, and whereas they visited the bank maybe once a month to get only a couple $100s to kind of tide them over, now they're coming once a week and taking out $1,000 from their bank account. So just like a teacher has immunity to be able to basically allege exploitation, report abuse or exploitation against a child, bank tellers can do the same in New Mexico.
Didn't know that.
So,
Wow. Yeah, because the thing of it is, you might be in a nursing home or an assisted living, but you still have access to a telephone, and that's how a lot of people get scammed.
absolutely,
Either that or, like you said, out of the community.
right.
And we often, as ombudsmen, find out about at least the exploitation, because all of a sudden the resident will get an involuntary discharge notice from the nursing home for non-payment. And if you talk to the elder, they'll say, well, that's not possible. I have $200,000 in a trust fund. Well, no, actually now you have $5,000 because your granddaughter has been into your trust fund.
Oh,
That's
what a nightmare.
blatant exploitation, and the most difficult part of that kind of exploitation is it's your family. It's different if you deal with a stranger, But when it's your family, that makes it, that involves shame. It involves, you know, he really is a good boy. Well,
Right.
he might be a good boy, but he stole 100,000 from you.
It's an enormous breach of trust.
Right. And,
You know
and
what?
that's
If you
hard.
if you could believe it, we only have 2 minutes. If you can believe it. I feel like we just started talking. So this, what if somebody wants to get a hold of this resident rights, the Ombudsman Long-Term Care Residents Advocate, this wonderful thing? Shall we put the phone number on the screen? And can somebody
Wait,
get this?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it is posted by law in every long-term care facility in New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Has to have, it's a poster, regular size poster.
Uh-huh.
It is both in English and in Spanish.
And
It
Navajo.
has,
And
and Navajo. And we
good.
have all the rights listed and contact phone numbers.
Fairness, freedom, choice, and privacy.
Yes.
What's your phone number?
The phone number for the program is 866-842-9230.
Nice.
Or the Aging and Long-Term Services Department website has contact information for the Ombudsman.
Nice. I have so much respect for the two of you. You do such wonderful work. It's so important. Thank you for coming on my show. Final words of wisdom to anybody watching?
Listen. Listen to vulnerable adults. They have a lot to say. Listen to them.
Yes. And if you are a vulnerable adult, make your voice heard. Come speak with us. Don't be,
Don't be scared. Don't be
yeah.
scared.
speak out,
Right.
because people are there. People do want to listen.
And you can protect them and help them and keep them safe.
Absolutely.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
Thank you.
Shannon, thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
Sandra,
Thank you for having us again.
you
Always a
rock.
pleasure.
You rock. You're going to have to come back and talk about it, because there's really nothing more important than your freedom.
Mhm.
And whether we're 9 or 90 or 109, we're Americans and residents of this state, and we deserve to be able to be free, for sure. Thank you for making that happen for so many people. And thank you for watching. This is Dr. Julia Bain. Until next time, be happy and be well.
This has been Employee Health Services Mind, Body, and Spirit. For more information, call the City of Albuquerque's Employee Health Services at 768-4613. Let the Employee Health Services staff let you be your best at work, at home, and at play.